Greetings, friends. This is Reverend Grant from St. George's. A few days after Halloween, I was out shopping, and lo and behold, before me stood the Christmas season. Up on the shelves were going all the different Christmas decorations, and being plastered around the stores were advertisements for the upcoming Christmas sales. Get your gifts so you can get them under the tree. This has been happening for years, where it seems that the Christmas season, which resides at the end of December, has just slowly inched its way all the way into November, and now really just kind of butting up into October. We are a culture that likes to rush things, and we don't like to wait. How many of us, if we pulled out our planners and our calendars right now, would find days and weeks just packed full of things with very little time to rest? Whether it's jumping from doctor's appointments to business meetings to everyday tasks to school and after school activities, we program ourselves to death. And if there's any doubt or any hesitancy around whether or not we live in a culture of fear, I invite you to take a drive on the Garden State Parkway. So what is it about waiting and holding space in the in-between moments that challenges us? For it does. Our culture around us doesn't like to wait. We rush through things because that in-between period leaves us uncertain and unsettled. And a society and a culture that affirms we are vital and necessary in all things, that if we're not producing, we're not doing something, to have time to wait and be still is fearful. It can feel as if we are falling behind or that we're not doing enough. And perhaps maybe that's what's the root of our rushing. For in waiting, we realize that really the world isn't all about us. And that thing that tells us in the back of our mind that we are the savior for all things, that we are the ones who can do all the repairs and all the fixes in the world, having that space in between reminds us that we can't do it all, and we're not meant to. This is something that our Christian faith teaches us and invites us to embrace over and over again. The psalmist in Psalm 62 reminds us of this. For God alone my soul waits in silence, for my hope is from him. He alone is my rock and my salvation, my fortress. I shall not be shaken. The Christian life invites us to embrace periods of waiting, of stillness. Not times that are us being inactive, for to wait and be still are actions. They're actions that tell and communicate to us in the world that we are not God. That it is not through our own strength that this world will be healed, but through God's alone. It's in that in-between space that we recognize that we cannot be all things to all people, that the great fears of the world, the anxieties that we carry, won't be solved through our own intellect. We need each other. We need God. And we need to know the difference of what is our work to do and what is others and what is God's. This is what waiting invites us into. It is the gift that it offers us. I think about my sister and how over these last few months, she and our family have been waiting expectantly for her fourth child to come this Christmas. And it's a required period of waiting. We can't rush it. That baby needs the time that it needs to grow and mature. And those of us around that child also need the time to prepare, to get the crib and the diapers, to make the crocheted blankets. We need time to be still and just contemplate the joy of what is to come. Now, joy, that's an important thing too. For we live in a culture of fear right now. And when we are surrounded by fear and anxiety, having periods of time to wait become all the more unbearable. But it's also in those times of waiting that we rediscover the gift of joy, the joy of what is to come, the hope of what God can do in our midst when we recognize that our strength is not enough. Joy is an act of resistance that is centered and rooted in the present moment, that looks at the fears and the anxieties around us, the shifts in our democratic institutions, the great injustices of the world, our everyday fears and anxieties. Those can drown us. And they can drown us because when we don't hold space to sit with them, we can't wrestle with them. We can't acknowledge and discern how we're meant to walk through them. But God invites us in the season of Advent to pause, to be still and wait, to hold that space so we can do that reflection time, so we can realize what is our work to do in this moment and what is God's. And all of it rooted in knowing that God's will win in the end. In the season of Advent, we prepare once again to receive Emmanuel, God among us. It is a promise that God will do what God has said God will do in bringing the world right and breaking the bonds of injustice and making justice to reign and flow on the earth, where broken hearts will be mended and those who were put to death will be raised to new life. We need time to wait so that we may be reminded of this hope, be reminded of the strength of God that moves in our lives, and to hold into the joy of that moment even when the world would invite us into spaces of fear. So this Advent, I invite you to journey with us, to embrace that in-between space of waiting in joy and anticipation for the coming of God's kingdom, and to not fear what this in-between space may elicit in us, but rather accept the gift of the moment that it is and discovering the joy of God among us in that space. Let us remember the words of the psalmist this season. For God alone my soul waits in silence, for my hope is in him. He alone is my rock and my salvation, my fortress. I shall not be shaken.